Madam Chairman, I'm going to start as you did. I'm going to be outside my prepared remarks for a minute and do a little look back and before we look forward. And I want to begin, you were nice enough to thank all of us. The reality is all of us should be thanking you and Ranking Member Granger for what you did. I'll point out this committee was ready to go to conference at the appropriate time. All 12 bills had passed out of this committee last year under your leadership. 9 of them across the floor. We were ready before September 30th. And I am particularly proud of how hard you pushed over and over again for demanding the least amount of time, first December, then February. But you were the leader in pushing the Congress toward getting its job done. And there's no more important job than funding the government across the board at every level. And we know, Mr. Secretary, we hobble you and your colleagues when we don't give you a budget on time. It forces you to wonder what you're going to be operating with. It slows down a lot of things that need to get done in a hurry. But that was not the responsibility of this committee at all. It was, again, ready to go to work, ready to sit down with the administration. Our friends in the Senate, I think, could learn a little bit from you, Madam Chair. As I recall, they didn't get any bills across the floor, and they only got 3 out of committee. I know everything's slower in the United States Senate, but really, 3 bills out of committee? Come on, guys. They need to pick up the pace over there. But I'm proud of this committee, even when I disagreed. And of course, initially we did. But I'm also pleased, as you pointed out, for the 7th year in a row, we got to a bill that we both could vote for. And again, that wouldn't have been possible without your leadership and Chairwoman Granger's leadership. And I think we certainly have R&D divisions around here, but we have institutional divisions as well. And I think our institution looked better than our counterpart on the other side of the rotunda. And you bear enormous responsibility for that. So I want to associate myself with your goal of making sure that we make, this by September 30th. My guess is we'll do a CR and kick it into the end of the calendar year, but it needs to get done, and sooner is better. On time is best. If not, the calendar year is best. I think, again, I'll pledge to work with you as hard as I possibly can to make sure that is our goal. It is a mistake to kick it into a new Congress where we will have new members on both sides of the aisle, and they'll have to vote on something that they've had very little knowledge, no participation in. And they deserve a clean start. And frankly, the administration deserves a clean start to the 3rd year as well. And so we look forward to working with you on that. Now, let me go to my formal remarks, if I may. Mr. Secretary, it is a pleasure to have you here. And as the chair said, it's wonderful to be back in the room and have the interaction. Particularly good, frankly, interacting with you. As you know our world better than any secretary I've dealt with. I've dealt with some good ones on both sides of the aisle, but it's always nice to have another member here that understands what are the challenges we have from a legislative standpoint, and you do. I'm glad that, again, our chair chose to hold this meeting in our full committee room so that some members could attend in person. I wish we could all be together in person for this hearing, as I think the dynamic and interaction among members is much better when we're all seated together in the same place rather than looking at each other through a computer screen. Nevertheless, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your personal accessibility to us as members. I've enjoyed the bipartisan breakfast you've been kind enough to host over the past years. I appreciate you understanding the challenges of legislating and having served this body yourself, and particularly your responsiveness on the phone or things like that, again, to both sides of the aisle have been greatly appreciated. Today is our annual budget hearing to discuss the administration's budget proposal for fiscal year 2023. We just completed the final funding bill for fiscal year 2022 only 3 weeks ago, so thanks for getting us right back to work, Madam Chair. I'm hopeful it does not take as long to complete the work on the budget this year for the coming fiscal year, and I was glad to see a return of bipartisanship and compromise in the bill recently completed. Although we had strong differences going in, we were able to forge a compromise that both the chair and I were able to support. For more than 4 decades, the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Bill has carried the so-called Hyde Amendment that restricts federal taxpayer funding for abortion under most circumstances. the fiscal year 2022 budget just completed was only able to advance because this language was again included. Thank my chair for seeing the wisdom in continuing this decades-old bipartisan compromise, although I know that she personally disagrees with it. I'm confident that the next spending bill we negotiate will continue to include it, as I continue to oppose any appropriations bill that seeks to weaken pro-life protections. Mr. Secretary, I expect under your leadership, HHS will continue to enforce these provisions of existing law. But let me be very friendly but firm. No Republican will vote for a budget in the end that does not have the Hyde protections. And in the end, we know it takes a bipartisan majority in both chambers to actually move this. So the choice is squarely with the administration and the majority. We'll once again be confronted with a choice: either Hyde comes back into the budget or accept a CR. And I want to be clear on that. I'm not trying to be anything else. It's just a political reality. Coming on the heels of such bipartisan negotiation, I'm again disappointed the Biden administration once again is putting forward a partisan proposal that seems a little more than a lengthy liberal wish list in some areas. For example, the budget proposes to implement partisan priorities such as climate change, gun research, and even a new Center for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity within the NIH. To pay for these partisan initiatives, long-standing shared bipartisan priorities are shortchanged. Basic biomedical research at the NIH is essentially flat funded, while the new ARPA-H, which was just created this month, and which, by the way, I supported, has not even begun to function yet, but it's proposed an enormous $4 billion increase. I think it's a mistake to shift funding away from basic biomedical research into a brand new program in 1 year. ARPA-H will take time to get up and running and take time to work out the many controversial issues I know this new agency will face. And I'll have some questions about your plans on ARPA-H this morning. I appreciate, by the way, your letter that clarified some things about it and also made it clear that you want to work with Congress. This is a very new entity, and we're going to have a lot of, wrestling with tough questions. I mean this in a very bipartisan way to get to a structure that we all think is producing what I know we all want it to produce. And again, I say that as somebody that supported the creation of the initiative and look forward to continuing to work with you on that, Madam Chair. Taken as a whole, I disagree strongly with the approach taken in the administration's request. Put it simply, it spends far too much on domestic programs, far too little on defense, especially now with the current situation in Eastern Europe. America cannot afford to stand or cut back our own defense spending. At a minimum, we need to see at least a 5% annual increases beyond the rate of inflation for defense spending for the next several years. But that's a matter for the full committee, not just this subcommittee, certainly. The President's proposal for fiscal year 2023 for this subcommittee amounts to a 15% effective increase. Coming in when the fiscal year is already halfway over, another huge infusion of spending in these domestic programs in fiscal 2023 is just not necessary. And I don't think it can be spent prudently and will only serve to increase our already growing inflation problem, which is now near a 40-year high. I know we're all hoping that the coronavirus pandemic, which began over 2 years ago, may finally be winding down to a manageable endemic disease. Despite the many challenges of the past 2 years, Congress was able to come together 5 times in 2020 to pass emergency supplemental appropriations to help us through the pandemic. I supported all 5 of those bills. I know we are not out of the woods yet. The administration's told us that funding for therapeutics and additional booster shots is running low, and we do not know if new variants are coming in the summer or the fall. Yet the administration has also released documents showing tens of billions of dollars, possibly as much as hundreds of billions, in previously appropriated COVID dollars remain unobligated and available. And look, let me just be brutally honest here and use my own state as an example. Under the proposed future distribution of money, I think we have something like $187 million ticketed for Oklahoma. We have a rainy day fund that we added $1 billion to last year. We had a tax cut last year. And I can tell you that $187 million is unlikely to be spent for corona-related purposes. We don't need the money. And I think some of the revolt we saw on my friend's side, again, was more governors that wanted to use the money for other purposes. If I were comfortable they were all going to spend it on the priorities that you've laid out in your budget, Mr. Secretary, that would be one thing. I'm not. But I'm not for just, throwing money away when we've got hundreds of billions of dollars of money that can be repurposed and aligned for this. And I know that's a political discussion as well as a policy debate. I recognize that, and I'm happy to work with my friends on that. But again, most of these states are in better financial shape, quite frankly, than the United States government is. Most of them have reserve funds. We don't have one. Most of them have balanced budgets. We don't have that. So the idea of us not taking some of the money that we wanted to lay out for coronavirus and saying, no, you guys really don't need it for other purposes, let's redirect it back, I think is a worthy discussion to have. Mr. Secretary, again, as I said, I urge you to repurpose these existing funds to secure additional doses of monoclonal antibodies and other therapies without delay. I urge you to use the remaining COVID balances as well as the increases we provided in the bill just passed in the NIH and BARDA accounts to continue to work on the next generation of vaccines. And hopefully a universal coronavirus vaccine or vaccine that targets mucosal membranes can be developed quickly and can not only prevent severe disease as our current vaccines do, but can also reduce transmissions and the need for additional boosters. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to comment on one part of your budget, which is not under this subcommittee's jurisdiction, but one which I wholeheartedly agree with your proposal. And that's your proposal to move the Indian Health Service to the mandatory side of the budget ledger. That's a move I believe is long overdue. And it will stop the competition for scarce resources that currently exist between the Indian Health Service and other programs important to Indian country, such as the Department of the Interior, the Bureau of Indian Schools, payment in lieu of taxes, reprogramming. Other programs are important in preserving our nation's natural resources. I hope this can work together to further this idea this year. My colleagues on this subcommittee have had to hear me probably more times than they care to, since it's not directly their jurisdiction. But having said on Interior, the reality is there's just not enough money in the discretionary budget to take care of the needs of Indian health, which is already the largest single item in the Interior Subcommittee appropriation. I think your approach here is a wise one. Sadly, every time we've had a government shutdown or delay in spending because the Indian Health Service is on the discretionary side of the budget instead of the mandatory, we've disrupted health care and reservations in some very poor communities. I think this is a very far-sighted proposal for you. I know you're going to get some stiff resistance on both sides of the aisle for a whole variety of reasons, but I think you're on the right track here, and I look forward to working with you, and I appreciate very much you advancing this proposal in your budget. So with that, Madam Chair, again, I look forward to working with you in the coming year. It's been a delight for 7 years in a row. It's ended successfully 7 years in a row. I hope it ends successfully the 8th time around. So with that, again, yield back to my friend, the chair.